Good
Hi,
morning.
good morning.
I
All
hate
right.
being late and I apologize.
That's okay. I got kids myself. One of them's in the kitchen getting set up right now, so I totally get it. All
Right?
right. Oh yeah. So, um, uh, uh, Comptroller Stringer, I would like to welcome you to the Bronx Parent Mayoral Education Forum, uh, presented by the Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group and in collaboration with community education councils for districts 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, the New Settlement Parent Action Committee, the African Democratic Club, and STENDUP Institute Incorporated. Um, my name is Tom Sheppard. I am one of the co-founders of the Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group. And again, I'd like to welcome you. Before we start, though, I would like to know, how would you like to be addressed? Is it Comptroller Stringer, Scott? You tell me.
Scott's cool.
Okay, Scott. So, what I like to do up front is just spend just a moment and explain the format for this, right? So, the way it's going to work is we're going to have a 2 minute opening statement, and it's going to be followed by a series of questions in which you will have a minute each to answer, and followed by a 1 minute closing statement. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
All right. So, with that being said, uh, uh, you have a uh, open mic. 2 minutes, please.
Well, let me start out by thanking you for giving me this chance to speak with all of you and to tell you that I'm a public school parent and I have gone through a real challenging time with my own two little guys, a third grader and a second grader, going to public school. I'm not a good remote learning teacher, and my wife and I have really struggled. And I think that's the story for so many parents in this city who suddenly were told that we have to educate our kids on remote devices that many times don't work, and having internet access that's not good enough. And I say this to you, telling you that I have a lot of privilege in my life. I have a credit card. I can do certain things for my children, but that's not true for kids in homeless shelters or kids in public housing with no internet service. And that has been I think, the disparity that we as parents and elected officials have to address. And the next mayor can no longer tolerate a two-tier education system. I've seen it firsthand. I have skin in the game. There's nothing that we won't do for our little babies, our kids. And we're going to have to make sure that we build out an education platform that addresses their a variety of issues that they face post-pandemic. I'm running for mayor because I have the vision and the skills to do this work for our kids. I'm a former assembly member, so I know what awaits us in Albany, and we have to reset the Albany relationship. No one's going to steal my lunch money in Albany. I'm a borough president, so I know about land use and zoning and working with CECs and looking for school space and expanding programs. And as controller, I know where the money's been wasted at the DOE, hundreds of millions of dollars that should have been in the classrooms, but are actually going to bureaucrats. That is all going to change when I'm mayor. I'm also a kid who grew up in Washington Heights. I know the public schools, and I know what we have to do for Bronx kids.
Thank you. So, the first question I'd like to ask you is uh, around language access. And that question is, how would you propose supporting and engaging families that schools have had difficulty connecting with due to language and or cultural barriers?
Well, we need to build a school system that respects the different languages that our parents and students speak. We have to respect the cultural diversity of our city. This is why we need to recognize that at the outset, the way we structure an education system is to make sure that we participate in building out programs that expand those opportunities. And I can tell you with great certainty that the beauty about speaking 250 different language from 200 countries is all the children get that rich cultural experience, not necessarily from the school and the teachers, but from their fellow classmates. I want to make sure that we build resources so that we can give every kid an education in their family's voice, in their language, and respect the cultural diversity of the people in our school system.
Thank you. Um, so our next question is uh, in a category that we call the new normal for schools. And our next question is, if this pandemic continues into your administration, what is your vision for supporting our schools from day one?
Well, my plan for supporting the kids from day one is to make sure that we give them the full on tutoring that they're going to need. Every child has missed some academics. And more importantly, every child is going to suffer this the trauma of a post-pandemic world because they basically missed a whole year of school. I want to make sure that we build out a mental health system in every school. No child should not have access to services that he or she are going to need. We know, especially in the Bronx, how many kids lost their moms and dad to COVID. A lot of these kids had frontline worker parents, and there has not been closure. I know that in my own family because my two little kids lost their grandmother. And it's really interesting because, Tom, there was a part of me that said, well, I've gotten over that hurdle. We may not have had traditional closure, but we've moved, right? We've been able to get our kids away from that mourning period. And my son Miles, my little 7-year-old, was talking to his teacher on Zoom and suddenly burst out crying. And I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "It's grandma." And we've got to prepare our kids because there's going to be these moments. So what I would say is tutoring one-on-one, and then we have to create a mental health system for our kids. And then I have a whole education plan that would transform how we're going to educate our kids under a Stringer administration.
Thank you, Scott. Uh, you mentioned like mental health supports, and I'm going to ask that question to you in a moment. But another uh, thing is that the this pandemic has shed light on a digital divide that has had a disproportionately negative impact on students and families here in the Bronx by impeding the quality of instruction our children receive during remote learning. Will you commit to technology rich schools and communities in which each child has a device and broadband access in schools and at home as part of our new normal in education, both in terms of curricula and usage?
The answer is yes. And look, I saw this firsthand as controller, and I saw this firsthand as a parent. The truth is that in so many of our digital deserts, we were thinking wrongly that you give a kid a remote device with no internet access, that was going to be good enough. And it wasn't. We have parents, single parents, who have 3 kids with one remote device and not enough internet access. Where was the Department of Education during this time period? They were nowhere. They were minimalist. They weren't looking at where the challenges were coming from. Everybody basically said, the kids will figure it out, the parents will figure it out, but I can tell you firsthand, no one was figuring it out. And now, where there was no digital opportunity, where there was no remote learning device, we have to take stock in the fact, the reality that a lot of kids who are already behind, who are already having trouble with resources, are being further behind. And I am tired of a school system that allows parents to determine one's kid's education based on a credit card that they have. It is time to equalize every classroom in this city. Private schools have 2 teachers in every classroom. It's time for public schools to have 2 teachers K-5 in every classroom. And that's what I'm going to do, a senior teacher and an assistant teacher, because that's how we give kids the actual day-to-day learning that they need. And I believe it starts with child care 0 to 3. We've got to create a subsidized and universal child care system for this city. Child care, 2 teachers, And then we need to attract a whole new generation of diverse teachers to the school system. That is what I'm going to do in the first 4 years as mayor.
Thank you, Scott. So, a minute ago, you talked about mental health resources, right? And uh, students in the Bronx have been disproportionately affected by trauma, and more so during this pandemic. For example, the Healing Centered Schools Roadmap lays out a variety of trauma informed and responsive practices conducive to the emotional well being of students, families, communities, and educators. What would be your approach to systematically supporting all Bronx schools and being healing centered spaces for all involved, especially in historically underserved neighborhoods where trauma was often pervasive before the pandemic?
Well, you're right about before. We don't really acknowledge that there was a before the pandemic. We've got to triple the number of social workers in the schools, and they have to be trauma informed and culturally competent professionals. Every school needs mental health and physical health professionals. It is part of learning, it goes together. And especially post pandemic, where again, so many Bronx kids lost parents and grandparents to the pandemic. Remember, this pandemic discriminated. It went after our most vulnerable. And the reason the Bronx was hardest hit was because government never invested in communities of color in the Bronx. We see this with education, we see this with affordable housing, and we see this with health initiatives. I want to be the mayor who understands that if we're going to create one city post pandemic, we've got to think differently about the economy. We cannot open it the same way we closed it. We can't keep this mantra going where anytime there's a dirty bus depot station or a peaker plant or some environmentally unsound development project, the mantra has always been put it uptown. Yeah, no, put it in the Bronx. No, that doesn't work anymore because COVID rooted out that. COVID said, no, we attack when there's type 2 diabetes. We attack when there's obesity issues and unhealthy communities. And I believe we have to change that in the new city that we have to build post pandemic.
Thank you, Scott. So I'm going to skip down a couple of questions here. And um, in 2019, the Department of Education adopted a culturally responsive and sustaining education framework. What is your vision for a practical short and long term application of this framework with students, families, communities, and schools?
I am very committed to the diversity of our city and of our school system. And one of the ways that I would start is to look at the challenges we're facing as relates to diversity, which is, let me see if I lost you. Oh, I'm sorry. Uh, one of the challenges that I think we have to deal with is that we need to attract more diverse teachers to the school system. We are losing 40% of our teachers after 5 years of teaching. They leave the system. And I want to set up a residency program. I want to make it possible that new teachers can have mentor teachers in the classrooms rather than throwing teachers into the classroom 2 weeks after graduation. I want to give them a year-long paid internship stipend to work with senior teachers to get the professional development that they need, and then use that as the foundation for reaching out and bringing more teachers of color, teachers of different backgrounds, because that's going to help our diverse school population. So I would start with the teachers, and then I would make sure that every child, regardless of background, religion, has the exact same opportunities to learn, to participate in after school programs, and build out an equal justice driven school system in every classroom.
Thank you, Scott. So the next question I have is on the issue of special education. The New York City Department of Education has a long history of special education complaint cases with an estimated 11,000 filed in the last school year alone. These cases take almost a year on average to resolve, well beyond the 75-day legal deadline as required by law. What is your intentional goal to improve the special education appeals process to ensure services and supports which are mandated under the IDEA Act are provided to our students with special needs? And what accountability measures would you implement to hold the DOE accountable for compliance?
You shouldn't have to sue to get a quality education and to get the resources your child needs. The Department of Education has been disgraceful in this area, putting parents through hell and back just to get their kids resources. A lot of parents can't afford to lay out tens of thousands of dollars and hope that the DOE eventually reimburses them. I've seen this as controller. When we get an issue before my office, we work extra hard to resolve that and get it back to the DOE. But for so many of these cases, the DOE has dragged their feet. They don't really want to work with parents. When I'm mayor, and I will know this because of all the candidates running, I have had to deal with the DOE on this issue. We will restructure, we will create a different system that we can resolve these cases and these issues, because education shouldn't be based on the lawyer you hire or the resources you have to float payments before there's reimbursement. This is just terrible for parents, and it puts kids in harm's way.
Thank you, Scott. I'm going to go back to a question around inclusion and equity, right? And that question is, as diverse as the Bronx is, our communities are segregated by race, gender, and ethnicity. What is your plan to ensure that all Bronx schools have a diverse student body, faculty, and staff that are culturally responsive and sensitive to their students?
Well, first of all, we have to bring more teachers and administration of color into the system. I want a teacher residency program that will identify and bring that diverse school population into every school. I also want to work with parents in every CEC in every district to come up with a meaningful diversity plan, because we all know that when you have diverse faculty, when you have diverse students, it's the greatest learning combination, because that's why we love New York, right? You know, I remember going to Kennedy High School, graduating from Kennedy, and look, I benefited all my life from the diversity of my high school. Taught me a lot about life and learning about different people, and I think every kid should have that opportunity. It's why I send my kids to public school. But let's face it, the schools have been segregated, and one of the places we have to start is with the Shazat test. No Black and brown kids can get into the specialized schools because this test is about test prep, not about learning in the classroom. So let's stop the Shazat. Let's swap it for the 7th grade test. Give kids the opportunity to be tested on the knowledge they get in the classroom. And then we need to think about, how do we build every classroom to be diverse, but also have resources? That's why I support 2 teachers. That's why I support after school for all children. School should not just be from 8:40 to 2:30 in the afternoon for some kids. And then the wealthier parent kids get to have after school robotics, chess, and athletics because of the credit card that that the parents may have. I got to equalize this entire system. Otherwise, we're always going to have inequity. We're always going to have 2 standards of education in the city, and we've covered it up long enough. So how would I do this? Work on the ground with the parents, work with the CECs, come up with that plan, but also do the work at the DOE to make sure that we're attracting the diverse teaching pool, the administrators, work with our labor allies to build that kind of system so that every kid can benefit.
Thank you so much. So, speaking of models of education, right?
Mhm.
So, our next issue is really around models of education specific to underserved communities. And the first question there is, schools in the Bronx are exploring urban agriculture by participating in programs such as FISH, Food Innovation, Sustainability, and Health. Would you support establishing and expanding these programs by creating agricultural hubs in elementary, middle, and high schools in partnership with community based organizations and the City and State University of New York?
Oh, make my day. You know, when I was Manhattan Borough President, I started a program called Go Green East Harlem, Go Green El Barrio. And the idea was to, you know, when I got elected borough president, and I suddenly realized, wow, I represent like the wealthiest people in the world, right? I mean, think about it, you know, and I looked at what communities I could make a difference in who were struggling economically. And I looked at El Barrio and said, why don't we start building a green community? And we worked with neighbors to do the following: bring farmers markets to El Barrio, bring green bodegas to the community, work with our kids starting a youth bucks program where we literally had kids from schools go to the farmers markets, buy fruits and vegetables, bring it home to the parents. I then wrote a cookbook, the best selling cookbook in America, called Go Green East Harlem, which were recipes from the community leaders in their own culture, but they were healthy recipes. We certified the recipes. Now, it wasn't the greatest selling cookbook, I admit it. I'm exaggerating. But that was the model. And the reason it worked is it wasn't top down, it was bottom up, because this is what we have to do. I believe in vertical farming. I believe in rooftop gardens. I funded them when I was borough president, long before people really knew what it was. So you elect me mayor, I'm going to green the Bronx, the rooftops, solar panels, batteries in every basement, and a robust opportunity to bring fresh fruit, fish, hydroponics. What a great place to start with our children. I'm so excited about that, Tom, because it's something, it's been a passion of mine for a very long time.
Thank you, Scott. So,
And Tom, I think I have
I,
time.
I'm
I think I have
yeah,
time
I
for,
was going to say I'm going to ask you one more question and
yeah.
then give you an opportunity to make a closing statement.
Thank you.
Um, this question is going to it's more about the models of education specific to underserved communities. So, over the past 2 decades, schools that provide vocational and technical training have been systematically removed as options for students in the Bronx. What will you do to provide our middle and high school students better access to career and technical educational opportunities?
Tom, this is another great question you have, because we're about to have a different kind of industrial revolution when I'm mayor. You know, we have an opportunity to build the green economy. And the way we're going to be able to do that is by retrofitting all those big buildings that have 73% of all the dangerous emissions. We're going to have, by law, the opportunity to retrofit those buildings. Bronx Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, her green public housing agenda on a federal level is something that the next mayor has to model. I know Andrew Yang said it was his plan, but it really is the Congresswoman's plan, but that's okay. And I want to bring the kind of workforce development training in high school and in college to the kids around the city. This is going to be the next industrial revolution. So how do we get there? We do have to have programs in high school, but I want to make 2-year CUNY free. I want to create a workforce development program in our community colleges in the Bronx and elsewhere. And what do I mean by that? We don't even need necessarily for kids to immediately get a 2-year or 4-year degree. If you just do micro credentialing, giving kids some training, we can get them into this new emerging workforce immediately. So if you have young people who are trying to raise families or older adults who want to go back into the economy, let's do workforce development training, and then let's build the green economy, which I believe is a $30 billion industry over the next 10 years. That is how we're going to get kids into workforce, into real jobs. These green jobs are going to replace the jobs that we lost during the pandemic. There'll be better paying jobs, there'll be union jobs, and this is how we grow the economy. But I think you laid it out there. If we're not training our high school kids and kids on their way to college, then our students in the Bronx and around the city will miss this opportunity to create the new set of jobs, working with your brain, working with your hands, and also creating a healthier city. I'm very committed to that.
Thank you, Scott. So, at this time, I would ask you if you could take a moment to, um, you have 1 minute for a closing statement. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I hope you appreciate that the schedule is getting even more hectic as we run around in person and on Zoom, trying to meet as many people as possible. But let me say this to you. I believe in public education. I believe in parents. I believe in what's possible for our kids. You know, I run for mayor through the lens of my 9-year-old and 7-year-old, because I got married late in life, and now I have these 2 little kids in public schools, I mentioned, and I want everything for them. I really do. It's what every parent lives for. And I also want to make sure as mayor that I'm also making it possible for every child to get the education that they need. And I do worry about the children who are in homeless shelters who are not getting access to learning, the kids in public housing. These are all of our children. And when government and the Department of Education fails their jobs, they're not just hurting us, they're hurting our next generation. And this mayoralty is going to be dedicated to the kids we may never meet, the kids we may never see, but they're out there. And they need a mayor who's going to be there every day for them, cutting the bureaucracy, resourcing classrooms, integrating schools, having a zero tolerance for bureaucratic incompetence that we've seen at the DOE cycle after cycle. Parents deserve better, and our children deserve better. And I'm a kid who grew up in Washington Heights. You know, we didn't go downtown. We went to the Bronx. We hung out on Fordham Road. You know, my stepfather, Carlos Cuevas, 91 strong, is a former deputy borough president of Bronx. And my mom, you know, until she passed, was Bronx through and through. And we've got to make sure that the Bronx becomes the epicenter of the economy, and that we make sure that every Bronx kid has the same resources everyone else does. If you elect me mayor, you're going to have a good chance that I can get us there.
So, Comptroller Scott Stringer, I would like to thank you again for taking time to participate in our Bronx Parent Mayoral Education Forum presented by the Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group in collaboration with Community Education Council 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, the New Settlement Parent Action Committee, the African Democratic Club, and STEMDUP Institute. Thank you again, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And by the way, great job moderating. You got everything out of me. Thank you. See you all soon.
All right. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Have a good day. Bye-bye. Thank you.